Hi, welcome to our class on literature brought to you by OT School's JAMB app. And today our topic is genres of literature. The word genre simply means kind or type. So by the time we say genres of literature, we're simply dealing with the categories literature is divided into. And there are three types or genres of literature. We have prose, poetry, and drama. These are the three major genres of literature that we have: the prose, the poetry, and the drama. For today, we are going to be starting with prose. So, genre simply means kind or type, and when we are dealing with those of literature, we say literature is divided into these three categories. So, these are the three genres of literature that we have, and we'll be starting with the prose. Prose is the most common genre of literature. Of these three that we have, prose is the most common, and it's simply writing in structured sentences and paragraphs. Simply like majorly the difference between these genres are the structures in which they are written. So prose is writing in structured sentences. And paragraphs. Let's put it this way. So for prose, you write until like there's no more space at the page, and then you move to the next line. Continue until you are done with that paragraph, and then you go to another paragraph. That is simply prose for you. You do not write in verses or rhymes in as the case of poetry. Some people believe prose is the exact opposite of poetry. So prose is simply writing in structured sentences. You write until there's no more space. That's prose. Or that's the end of that paragraph, and then you move to another paragraph. This is simply in the structure for prose. And we have established that prose is the most common genre. Examples of prose we have novels, we have novels, essays, journals, articles, etc. These are examples of prose that are written in structured sentences and paragraphs. So the structures of these are similar when writing these examples of prose. Now, prose on its own is also divided into three. We said the genres of literature are prose, poetry, and drama. We're beginning with prose, and we've explained what prose is, given examples. We now want to look at the classifications of prose. So prose is also divided into we have fiction, non-fiction, and faction. So we can say these are like types of prose: fiction, non-fiction, and faction. First up, we have fiction. Fiction is based on a writer's imagination. A writer creatively works on a work, a literary work. We call it fiction. The events in fiction are not real. It is based on the writer's creativity. So the events in fiction are imaginary, they are not real. And fiction is used mostly for entertainment, although it can be used for other purposes like to persuade or convince or to pass messages across to like present different viewpoints or even to incite. We have other uses of prose like that, but majorly it is for entertainment and it is based on the writer's imagination. All like non-fiction, which is the exact opposite of fiction, is based on real events. Non-fiction is based on real events or is a type of prose that gives a factual account of something or an event that took place. So it's either based on real events or it's a type of prose that gives factual accounts. Fiction is based on the writer's imagination. The events are imaginary, but for non-fiction, real events or true stories, or it gives you facts. Examples of fiction now we have novels, short stories. We also have novelettes, fables. These are examples of fiction now based on a writer's imagination. So novels, short stories, novelettes, they are similar. The only difference is in the length or the number of pages that they have. Short stories, the shortest, then we have novelettes. Novelettes are too small to be classified as novels and they are too big to be classified as short stories. So we call them novelettes. And then we have novels, the bigger, more developed prose. So we call it novels. Then examples of non-fiction, we have autobiographies, essays, textbooks, newspaper articles. Those are some examples of non-fiction. Autobiographies, biographies, essays, textbook, newspaper articles, manuals. There are some examples of non-fiction. They are either based on real events or they give us facts. They give us facts. So they are non-fiction. Then faction is simply a blend. This is gotten fact plus fiction. Gives us faction. So it's actually a combination of fiction and non-fiction. So it's made up of real life events with a mix of the author's imagination. So fact plus fiction gives us the word faction and is a mix. It is a mixture of real life events and the author's or the writer's creativity or imagination. We said there are three types of prose: fiction, non-fiction, and faction. For fiction, we're talking of imaginary events, something that is purely based on the writer's thinking abilities. While for non-fiction, we're talking of real life events or something that gives us facts. We gave examples. Then faction, fact plus fiction gives us faction, and it's a mixture of real life events. That's a blend of fiction and non-fiction gives us faction. Now let's look at the features of prose. Now I want to look at the features of prose. First up, we have style. Style is simply the way a writer writes. We say style is the way a writer writes. That's simply the technique or the method in which a writer presents their work or tell their stories. You have style, and it varies or it differs from individual to individual. Each writer has his own style, and sometimes the style could vary depending on what you're working on. A particular style might not work for a particular type of book or whatever it is you have working on. So, style is simply the way a writer writes, the way a writer tells his story, presents his work, or passes messages across. And we can get a writer's style when we look at his word choice, that's the diction, we look at the tone, we look at the syntax, like the grammatical expressions, the language. It doesn't like using idioms, figures of speech, proverbs a lot. So we look at those and to determine a writer's style. Then style can be divided into we say style can be argumentative, persuasive, descriptive, or narrative. So, style as a feature of prose is simply the way a writer writes, the technique individual uses in passing their messages across or telling their stories. I would say it depends on the writer's diction, tone. You check out for those to determine the writer's style, and then these are the type of styles that you can have: argumentative, persuasive, descriptive, or narrative. Another feature of prose we have is syntax. Syntax, which is simply the arrangement of words in order to make a complete thought. So syntax is simply the arrangement of words in order to make a complete thought. The how we arrange words to make sense, or should I say how writers arrange words to make sense and effectively pass their messages across. In prose, syntax helps us with the tone of the work, and it also helps to contribute meaning, but mostly with the tone. To determine the tone, we look at the syntax, the way the words were arranged and presented helps us with the tone in prose. Another feature of prose is the narrative technique, which is simply the method used by writers. Used by writers to convey their messages. So another feature of prose is narrative technique. I would say it's a method used by writers to convey their messages. Some narrative techniques include we have under this now we have point of view. Point of view indicates the angle or the perspective that the story is being told from. Perspective from which the story is told. So under narrative technique, which is method used by writers to convey their messages, we have point of view. I would say point of view is simply the perspective from which the story is told, or you can say the angle from which the story is told. Usually it's told from the perspective of the protagonist, or sometimes there could be a narrator that's like not part of the story or not part of the work, just someone from outside telling the story. So point of view usually expressed with pronouns. With the use of pronouns. Point of view is usually expressed with the use of pronouns. Based on that, we now have three types of point of view, which are first person, second person, third person. So we say point of view is simply the perspective from which the story is told. That's simply who is telling the story. And we said it could be a character, like mainly the protagonist, or it can be like a narrator, someone outside. And then so we express it with the use of pronouns, which now gives us the types of point of view. It could be the first person, second person, or the third person. For the first person point of view, a character in the story, that's a character that's part of the story, is telling the story for first person point of view. I will use first person pronouns like I, we, when using the first person point of view as a narrative technique. So we use these first person pronouns and it's usually used in autobiographies. First person point of view, very common in autobiographies. Then we have the second person point of view, which is you, second person pronouns are used when we are dealing with the second person point of view as a narrative technique. Now, this is not very common because it can easily lead to confusion both on the part of the writer and the reader. So, it's not that common. So, for third person point of view, a narrator describes the event, and we have third person pronouns like he, she, they, them, like that, those third person pronouns. And then third person point of view can be divided into omniscient and limited. So if the narrator can just see what is in front, like the narrator is restricted in what he knows, we say it is a limited third person point of view. While the narrator like knows everything about the work, the characters in it, we say it is an omniscient point of view. So with narrative technique is a method used by writers to convey their messages. And we said under it we have point of view, which simply means the perspective or the angle, or we say the person telling the story. So it is usually expressed with the use of pronouns, which now gives us the type of point of views that we have: first person, second person, and third person. First person uses first person pronoun, mostly found in autobiographies. Then we have second person point of view that uses the second person pronouns, which is you. Then we have the third person point of view. Well, so it's divided into omniscient and limited. For third person, the narrator is describing the event now and referring to the characters in the story as he or she, or other third person pronouns that we have, singular or plural. And say for omniscient, the narrator knows everything, can tell everything about the characters and the story. For limited, the narrator is restricted, can only tell maybe what is in front at a particular time. That's limited. Then also we have streams of consciousness. Stream of consciousness, a narrative technique that tries to explore the thought process of the characters, or like the inner flow of thoughts of characters. We refer to that as stream of consciousness. Is a narrative technique, a method that writers use in telling their stories. So when you try to like explore the thought process of characters like in a realistic way. Try to present it in a way that it actually happens, the way we think really in reality. When you try to write it that way or present characters' thought process that we refer to it as stream of consciousness. This helps to help us understand the psychological state of characters in literary works. So stream of consciousness, let's write the definition, is a narrative technique that tries to explore characters' thought process in a realistic way. So tries to explore a character's thought process in a realistic way, tries to present it in the manner that it actually happens. Other narrative techniques, we have the language, that's like the diction, the syntax, grammatical expressions used by writers. We also have literary devices like flashback, foreshadowing. Those are common examples of narrative techniques. Even figures of speech, good examples of narrative techniques as features of prose. So to recap all what we did, today we started looking at genres of literature where we said there are three major genres, which is the prose, the poetry, and drama. Today we started with prose, and we defined prose as a genre of literature that deals with writing in structured sentences and paragraphs. And under prose, we have fiction, non-fiction, and faction. Don't forget that prose is the most common genre of literature that we have, and fiction is a type of prose that deals with events based on the imagination of the writer, while non-fiction has to do with real life or true story events or facts, dealing with true accounts, giving us facts about something. But we have examples as textbook, essays, autobiographies. Then we say faction is a blend of fiction and non-fiction. Then we look at the features of prose. We have style, syntax, narrative technique. And under narrative technique, we have point of view, stream of consciousness, language, flash forwarding, figures of speech, etc. Thank you.